Hi everyone, it's Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore here, and welcome to the Music Masterclass. This is my regular series I do on Thursdays where I talk about making music, and we look at some of your compositions, some of your arrangements, and give my feedback, talk about whatever aspects of making music we're working on. We've been working on SATV music lately, and I kind of want to wrap up some of that discussion today and look at some more pieces and maybe set the stage for next month, maybe a new topic to think about. So welcome everyone, glad to see people checking in. And as usual, I have pinned to the top the link to the Mastering MuseScore School, where you can check out my courses. I have my basic theory course, which is really, making sure you know your scales, your major scales, your triads, just the real basics of music theory. And then I have the harmony and chord progressions course, which is really a lot of the meat of what I talk about in these sessions, has to do with how chords fit together, why this chord gets used here instead of that chord. And then there's the counterpoint course also, where we talk about counterpoint. And so these are all kind of relevant things to the kind of music that we're dealing with here. So yes, glad to see everyone here from all over the world. And what I'm going to do is take a look, because I haven't had a chance yet this morning to check on things. I'm working on new stuff as always. So hoping to have some nice new things going on as far as the ability to bring people on board to talk and do chats and so forth. So some technical things that I've been working on myself. So I'll be able to hopefully talk about that more next month. So there's one thing that I want to show because it came up in a discussion in the forum, and it's really a cool thing. And I'm glad Dave brought it up because then I was able to remember that this is a thing. Ooh, this is not found. So sorry, that version of the score isn't found. It doesn't really matter what it is. Let me show you the technique. The technique is, what if you really want to hear these chords like as they go by more slowly? What I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat. I'm going to make this tempo marking be 1. Do I really want to do that, or do I just want to use the inspector? Whatever. I'm going to do this. Now, when I play this, 1 beat a minute. It's going to take a long time, right? It's going to be a whole minute. But I don't need it to be a whole minute, because I can use the cursors. Backwards. Ooh, control. Oh, I guess I can't. I guess going back to the previous measure is trickier than I thought it was. But I can go within a measure, 1 note at a time. I'm hitting cursor keys here, 1 note at a time. And I guess that will be as if I turn on my keylogger thing. Demo. So. Right? It's moving basically 1 note at a time. And now, yeah, it's just tricky. I think it's the grace note maybe that's messing up the ability to go backward. Because usually, yeah, so that is the story. Now I know. That grace notes prevent me from moving backwards. But other than that, I can hear these chords 1 at a time. 1. Right? It's really kind of nice when you're trying to work out what's going on harmonically in one of your pieces, and you want to really hear the chords individually. So it's a cool little thing you can do in MuseScore. All right. So what I'm going to do is now jump over here and grab whatever the most recent pieces are here. Here's 3 different versions. Okay, so Jim's got a question about realism of the playback using some other tools. I think what I'm going to do is deal with that at another time. But just because I'm not really an expert on all these audio things, and I'm not sure what I'll have to say on the spur of the moment here. And it looks like Heist has a piece here that's a duet, and so I'll also maybe come back to that. And I just want to get to see what some of the most recent things are. But yeah, I'll just go ahead and take the most recent version of the of Jim's piece, just to talk about it musically and not worry so much about the harmonies, not worry about the playback. So let's see what we got here. If I download it, oh, did you disable download? Sometimes I know you do. Oh, I'm good. All right. So I don't have as prepared as I could have been as far as having previously downloaded these things, because my head's been in the cloud working on this technical stuff that I've been working on. But I promise it'll be worth it. You'll really enjoy the new stuff that's coming. All right. So I've now saved Jim's example, and let's take a little listen here. Here we go. So I really like this, and so now I'm actually I'm sorry to doubt, but is this actually your arrangement, Jim? I'm just wondering, because it's really good. Not that I don't think that it's that you're capable of doing good things, but it's different than kinds of things that I've heard before. But it's really cool. So yeah, I love this, and he even says it's got drop two voicings, and this is really nice, the way he uses the drop two voicings. So I'm going to do the same technique that I've done on other pieces, which is bring in a piano staff and use implode. So I'm going to select these guys and then implode them, and then copy it down to the piano staff. And now do the same with the bottom two staves. Select them, implode them, copy, undo my implode, and copy it down to the bottom staff of the piano. So now I can see the harmonies better. I work better this way. So, and now I can play them, right? So he's got... He's got all these chords going on here, right? And so let's think about what's happening with the, and it sounds great. He calls these drop two voicings, which is what they are. But when we call them drop two voicings, what that really means is the second to top note has been dropped down an octave. So when I play the voicing as it is, the A flat that's currently in the bass, it was originally up here. And when I say originally, what I mean is this is what's called close position voicing, right? All the notes are as close together as possible. This is an A flat chord with an added sixth. So he starts with his A flat chord with the added sixth, then takes the second to top note and drops it down. And that's just a really nice arranging technique. Now, to be honest, it's seen in vocal arranging, but not as the type of thing that's going on here isn't doesn't happen a ton. In other words, we use drop two voicing some, but this technique of using them on every single note, this is it's very common in instrumental writing. It's a little less common in vocal writing, but I think it's really effective and really cool. So the other thing that mentioned, if we look at the third chord there, the last beat of the measure, that's also the same chord, right? It's A flat with an added sixth. So A flat major with the added sixth, and the second to top note dropped down an octave. So the middle note there is the one that's not in the chord, right? Conceptually, this is all an A flat chord. But this D flat is not in the chord. So what he's done is harmonized it in a way that sounds good. If I want to talk about what's actually going on, though, it's a little tricky to talk about here. If I take this B flat up an octave, I get this sound. Now, this sound here is, what is this? I don't exactly know what to call it. And it's not because I'm not smart enough to figure it out. It's because it's ambiguous. This set of notes could live under different names. I could think of it as a B flat minor chord, a B flat minor chord with an added 11th, right? I could think of it as an E flat 7 chord with an added 9th, right? There's different ways of looking at what that chord is. So when you're using this type of technique, when you get to these non-chord tones, there's actually a number of different things that work. And so I'm curious, Jim, if you're actually here, if you had a particular technique of what you were thinking of here, because what you're not doing any of the things that I know of as the standard things to do. So let me work through what the standard things are. One of them is the one that I've talked about many times before, which is harmonizing with diminished chords. And Rod, you asked me a question about that I haven't gotten back to you on, but now I get to answer it. This D flat chord, this D flat melody note, if I harmonize this with a diminished chord, any diminished chord, any inversion of a diminished chord, they're all the same chord, right? Diminished chords have that quality where when you invert them, this is technically D flat diminished, this is E diminished, this is G diminished, this is B flat diminished, but they all have the same 4 notes in them. That's like an interesting quality. It's called symmetric, that diminished and augmented chords have. So if I were to spell a D flat chord, a D flat diminished chord, literally, I'd have D flat, F flat, A double flat, C double flat. Why am I spelling it that way? Because that's how you would have to spell it. D, whoops, what did I do? Who knows? D flat, and then F flat, A double flat. And so in order to get a double flat, I'll move it down 2, and then I'll hit J to respell it. So you can see why it's spelt that way, so that we can read it as space, space, space. So space, 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 that's how we expect chords to be spelt. So that is the correct spell. And then again, on top would be C double flat, and respell that until it looks like a C double flat. Oh, J doesn't even want to give me double flat, so I have to actually use the actual command. So I tried to get cute and switch to my presentation workspace, which has no toolbar at all, but obviously that was a mistake because I do need the toolbar to get to my double flat because I don't have a shortcut. So this is the correct spelling of D double flat, but that's ugly, right? No one wants to look at all those double flats. So instead, we wouldn't call that chord D flat diminished. We would call it one of the other diminished chords. And the diminished chord that occurs naturally in the key of A flat would be the 7 chord, G. So if I spell it as G, B flat, D flat, F flat, then this is much more closely related to the key. G and B flat and D flat are all in the key of A flat's the only borrowed note here. So I technically would call that a G diminished chord and spell it that way. So anyhow, getting back to the actual arrangement here, if I were to use that technique, then I would want this to be a G diminished chord. So I'd still take the B flat down an octave. This E flat would be E natural, and the F would be G. So I'm going to play it the way it is, and then I'm going to make that change. And I'm actually going to use the slow down trick here because it's so fun. Isn't that fun? And I kind of like hearing the voices and the piano together because the voices sustain, but the piano gives me the percussive attack that I want. So that's what Jim has written, and it's all diatonic, and you can do that. You can write, this is a fine, even though I can't put a name to it, it sounds fine, right? So you can do that. You can just come up with things that you think sound fine. But there are specific techniques that work in very specific ways. So if I want to change this to, actually, technically it was F flat, and then this guy was a G. So all I've done is move 2 notes by a half step. Let's see what this sounds like now. Oh, but except if I'm going to change them here, I need to change them in the voice parts too. Otherwise, they clash, right? So maybe, yeah, maybe I'll just silence the voices. It was nice while it lasted, but sorry, voices. I have to just solo the piano part. That's simpler. Solo the piano part, but I can change the piano to different sounds. I'm going to use oboes. I find, because someone else showed me this, that oboes really work well as a sort of imitation of the human voice. Hopefully it's really using a bassoon or an English horn in the lower range. Well, let's hear this now. Huh, I thought I changed it, but obviously I didn't. I changed something else. Oboe. So that's using that technique of the diminished chord. That's the thing that I showed in my newsletter this week. So the diminished chord works really well. And then the same thing could happen on the way down, right? Because we're going to have the exact same chords on the way down. G. So I could totally do this on the way down too. Whoops. Right, same things on the way. And then I can do the same trick here. B flat is not in my chord, so I harmonize it with that same diminished chord. By the way, so I mentioned this in the cafe yesterday. If I take F and move it down arrow, because there's an E flat in the key, it will let me have an F flat. It won't immediately move it to E natural. It sort of checks what key you're in to decide if the spelling makes sense, if the note makes sense. So here we go. So that technique of using these alternating diminished chords, it's really nice. It's really nice, but it's not the only one. So Jim's idea of just finding something more diatonic totally works also. But there's also fairly specific techniques that people use for that also. So the thing is, this diminished chord, I'm using a G diminished chord. Well, instead of a G diminished chord here, if I just stick an E flat underneath it, now it's E flat 7. In other words, in the key of A flat, G is my 7 chord, E flat is my 5 chord. So they're almost the same chord, my 7 chord, my 5 chord. So really the 5 chord works just about as well, and they're only one note different, right? The 7 chord has this F flat in it, and the 7 chord has the F flat, the 5 chord has the E flat. So all I would have to do then is change that F flat back to E flat. F flat, back to E flat, F flat, back to E flat. This isn't exactly what Jim had, because Jim had, he had an, now I don't even remember. He had this, right? So he didn't actually have the G. And the G is the note that kind of would have made it into this, and which is what I have now. Dominant seventh chord. So now we have a dominant seventh chord. And if you're trying to make a barbershop style arrangement, you're going to love those dominant seventh chords and go out of your way to have them. Technically, they call them barbershop sevenths, and we'll tell you, oh, it's not a dominant seventh because we tune the seventh differently in how we sing it. I can't prove that. My piano isn't capable of doing that. I know that much. So this version of things now should also sound good. Now, there might be some parallel fifths and things going on in here like this. Did you all hear that? I heard that. Sometimes I hear parallel fifths. Sometimes I don't see them until too late. But this time, I heard the parallel fifth, and this is the parallel fifths between those voices right there. Yeah, and this one is a perfect fifth to a diminished fifth. Yeah, that one's questionable as far as how okay that is. Different people will tell you different things according to the context. Some people say it's okay to go perfect fifth to diminished. Some people will say that's okay, but the reverse, or that's not okay, but the reverse is okay. And some people say, well, it depends on if you're going up or down. And there's trust your ears is what I say. So anyhow, I didn't really love the plain dominant seventh sound. It was okay, but I didn't love it here especially. So in this spot, I might choose to fix it exactly that way and maybe live with it, because these aren't parallel fifths on the way up. Well, this is the perfect fifth to diminished fifth. So by just making that F flat there, bringing it back to the diminished chord, I fixed my parallel fifth, and now I have a mix of techniques, right? I have the dominant seventh there, and then the dominant seventh here, and the diminished chord there. So that's all fine. There's another technique that's worth knowing. I don't know how well it's going to work here, but I'm going to try it anyhow because I'm curious, and it's called planing. Planing, at least that's the name I learned it at. Planing is a term that we use for moving all notes in parallel. Now, that's going to give me parallel fifths because this voicing has a fifth in it. But maybe I changed my voicing to make that not be the case. We'll see. But let me show you the idea. The idea is, well, this happens to be planing already. What am I doing? There we go. Because what happens is every note is moving by step. Every note moving by step. So when you do planing, you can do it like I am here, where I'm just staying within the key, but you can also fix some notes if you feel like that's going to improve your harmony or save you from some parallel fifths. So in any case, the planing technique here happened to give me the same answer, but it doesn't always give you the same answer. If this voicing, instead of having an F there, had a G, if it had been this, if it had been that voicing with a major seventh instead of a sixth, then I can use my planing techniques to move each voice by step. You know, even though those are parallel fifths, I'm not hearing it as strongly because it's in the bottom voices. And so the other thing to just realize is in this style of writing, parallel fifths are not the worst thing in the world. You know, we still think about Did I hear that? Did I like that? But we don't stress about it so much. In any case, this idea then of moving this voicing here, I don't know what to call it. I mean, I could look at it and say, hey, it's G, B flat, D flat, and F. It's a G half diminished chord. But I didn't pick it because it was G half diminished. I picked it because it was every note moving by step. And it can be an often good technique. Let me see if I can use it in the next measure. I keep forgetting that I've got the manual. Okay, so here it's a dominant 7th chord, B flat 7, and then so B flat 7, and then another B flat 7, except he doesn't have it voiced. He has this voiced as like a major chord, he has it voiced with a G here with no 7th, so he's not keeping to the 7th. I'm going to change this around just to do it. If I want this to be a B, maybe the chord isn't supposed to be B flat 7, but I'm going to pretend it is. B flat 7, and then the F is not in the chord, and then this, I'm not making sense. B flat 7, B flat 7, right? These are B flats. Those are both B flat 7s, and he has it spelt that way at the downbeat of the next bar. So B flat 7, B flat 7. And what he has is holding on to these notes here. I mean, I changed one of them, but he's got some notes being held. We don't need to do that. We could either use the diminished chord technique or this planing technique. So I'm going to try it both ways. I'm going to try the diminished chord technique first. So I'm going to make a diminished chord that includes the C. And since I'm trying to get to B flat, I'm going to use A diminished. So it would be like the 7 in whatever chord you're basically tonicizing is the word. We use the diminished chord a half step below is how it works. A, it'll be A, and then C. Oh, C's in the melody. And this guy will be E flat, and this guy will be G flat. So let's hear this. So that's using the diminished chord technique. If I want to use the planing technique, then maybe I let that just be a G natural. And because I want to approach everything by step. C by step to B flat, G by step to F, E flat by step to D. And here, instead of A, I'll just use a B flat so that it stays diatonic. So now every voice is moving by step. Right? We have boom, A, B flat, A flat, and then E flat, D, G, F, C, B flat, singing everything an octave below this. So let's hear what this sounds like. So that works also. So as far as specific techniques worth knowing, that those are two really good ones. Knowing to use diminished chords, passing diminished chords, they're called, or this planing technique where you look at the chord you're trying to get to, and you just move everything by step. You just pick notes. If the melody went down by step, then you harmonize that melody note with basically the same chord a step higher is essentially the way that works, or the same voicing a step higher. And that's often a nice technique also. There's other ways of doing things and thinking about other harmonizations and substitutions and so forth, but those are two really good ones. So anyhow, yeah, I'm not going to like stop and talk about every single thing in this piece because I want to take another look at something else. But it is really good writing here. And as I slow it down, so in this style, the repeated notes might not be a problem, but if we wanted to not have the repeated notes, remember what we did last week, Sam asked about this. Since all the voices are repeating, I can at least switch the alto, take the alto down to a D flat, take the tenor up to an E flat. So we have the exact same voicing. It's the exact, oh no, sorry, it was a D natural. Oh no, it was a D flat. Let me, I got to remember what it was. Yeah, so this was a D flat, and then so this is now going to be a D flat. And so yeah, this is how it sounded before. It's not going to sound any different at all. It sounds no different, but it does mean that people don't necessarily have to have repeated notes. So that's a totally fine thing to do. If you wanted to also say, well, can we do something other than the repeated G there? Well, now you have to play other games with how you voice things. Those techniques of the voicing are actually not, because that's more of an arranging technique. The idea that diminished chords approach chords, yes, that is. The idea that, well, planing isn't, because that's not even a harmonic technique. It's just an arranging technique for how to harmonize melodies specifically. It's not so much about the chord progression. That's the distinction I would make. So at some point, I am going to do an arranging course where I talk about these sorts of details, because it is a kind of a different thing. But the harmony course is more about the big picture harmonies. Why were we having an A flat chord to begin with? Why did we have a B flat chord to begin with? The details of then how do we harmonize each melody note within the melody, that's an arranging question. So like here, if I wanted to avoid the repeated G here, I'd have to think about how I want to actually do that. But I know one thing I want to try. I want to try giving it the flat 9, because I know this is pretty crunchy, to use the term I've been using, and I might not voice it this way. But the idea is that I have a chord here that, and I think I talked about this a couple weeks ago, the idea that sometimes in a dominant 7th chord, we can omit the 3rd and use a flat 9 instead. So this, as a substitution for this, using flat 9 in place of the 3rd, that sometimes works. I'm not so sure about it with the C on top, but it sounds okay on the piano, but let me hear it in context here. I'll let MuseScore play it for me. That's, yeah, it's definitely quite dissonant, right? But, you know, we don't hear it for that long. I'd have to really ask myself if I was okay with that sound or not. Yeah, I would just have to think about that. But I'm just looking for ways around the repeated G. Here's the other way around it, though. What if I let the G be here, but instead of having the 3rd here, instead of having the 3rd, let it be the 4th. 4, 3, sorry. 4, 3. That's always good. We call it a sus chord if it's got a 4th in it. Technically, this isn't a suspension because the A flat wasn't held over from the previous chord, but there was an A flat in the melody. So it's all the same. So that way, now there's no repetition at all. And we also created a nice, interesting motion of that 4 to 3. Is this better? Yeah, no, not necessarily, but it's worth trying. And the same thing here. Instead of repeating the D here, let me just give it an E flat, see if that makes me any happier. Yeah, I'm kind of liking that. So this chord here, I'm wondering also about if I need the B flat there, or if I could, you know, revoice this chord, you know, maybe make it into an F minor 7. So, because eventually we're going to have a B flat 7, but what if I call this F minor 7 so that I have a 2-5 here? That is the kind of stuff that's actually in the harmony course. So instead of a B flat there, I'm going to make that be a C. And now no repeated notes anywhere. Is that better than it was before? I don't know. There was something charming about the sound of it before, the just the melody moving while the other chords don't. And that's an opportunity to go where you just sustain the bottom two notes, or bottom three notes, and then resolve it. So sustaining the notes rather than actually repeating them can often be a good technique. But in any case, this is something, whether you decide you liked it better here or not, it's something to know, because somewhere you will want this technique. So knowing these things of using these motions, using the 4-3, the 9 to flat 9, remember all these things that we talked about as inner voice motions during the jazz piano holiday course and all the master classes that I did around it. Those techniques are still good here. Yeah, I like that. So anyhow, yeah, really, really nice stuff in here, Jim. And yeah, there's opportunities for me to make little adjustments to see if I'm going to like it better. But, I've been harping on the repeated notes. They're not a problem. I don't want to give you the wrong idea that repeated notes are inherently bad in vocal music. They're not. It's just an opportunity. The repeated notes often indicate a missed opportunity. And the thing is, in like 17th, 18th, 19th century hymn harmonizations, you're mostly dealing with triads and occasional seventh chords. It's much harder to avoid the repetitions in those cases when you're trying to be mostly diatonic and just work within those chords. But as soon as you omit the possibilities of flat nines on your chords and introducing additional secondary dominants and passing diminished chords and all these other things that we're doing, once you start getting into music that has that kind of harmonic language, it becomes less necessary to have repeated notes. So it's usually possible to avoid them using these techniques. And they won't sound like Bach, because Bach was not speaking this language. His language was much more triadic. He did use passing diminished chords for sure, but it was a simpler language. It's simpler in some ways, I guess, but not as harmonically complex as far as chord to chord. There was triads or seventh chords, whether we were talking a major triad, minor triad, diminished triad, or adding a seventh to one of those. That's the language that Bach was speaking. We didn't have these flat nines. He did use suspensions, but then they were properly prepared. It wasn't just the sound of 4-3 like this. The way I use that 4-3 is not, Bach would not have he wouldn't have allowed that A flat on this chord here because it wasn't properly prepared with an A flat in the previous voice. It wasn't his language. So in any case, we're not Bach, right? We are doing things that, modern musicians can do. And so, yeah, I think it just gives us some good tools. All right, I'm going to flip over now and just see what else was submitted nice and recently that I can take a look at. And I looked at a bunch of versions of this. I want to pop up to looking for, I guess maybe isn't anything particularly new in the SATB world here. There's some other scores in here, which is fine. But I'm going to go ahead and look at Heisen's Duet then, and just check that out. So let me download that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what I want you to start thinking about next week. So that's fine that if we don't have a ton of new things here. And it's possible I also missed something from before. Oh, yeah, I only want to be with you. I want to load that one up in a minute. Because that had some nice stuff in it that I looked at briefly. All right. So, so the thing with the "I Only Want to Be with You" was this is really just cool arrangement, and I'll talk about this in this horn arrangement going on. Y'all remember this song? Anyhow, y'all remember that song? I'm going to talk about this a different time because there's other things that I want to talk about in it that aren't, relating to what we're talking about right now. But Heisen's piece here, I will be able to relate, and then I'll be able to introduce the new topic from this. So Rod's asking, is what is called a sus chord actually 4/3? So the thing is, what we call a sus chord is just the 4 part of it. In other words, here's B flat 7. This is B flat 7 sus. You don't resolve that fourth until someone tells you to. They'll write B flat 7 sus, and then they'll write B flat 7 after that if they want you to resolve that. But often we just use this. In fact, there's a really famous song in the jazz world called Maiden Voyage. The entire piece is nothing but unresolved dominant 7th chords. We never resolve it there, or we never resolve it. I mean Herbie Hancock, who wrote that piece, the melody itself, the way he voices his accompaniment, there are no resolutions. Now, in people's improvised solos over that, yeah, they play thirds all the time. But typically, they don't. No, so the "I Only Want to Be With You" arrangement is, I should know, but I don't remember. It was someone relatively new to the proceedings, right? Steiner, that's right. So yeah, there's some really cool stuff in here, and I will talk about it, but not at the moment. I just wanted to play it because it's fun. I want to talk a little bit about Heisen's Duet, and then I'm playing just this much of the Duet because I'm going to use this to introduce a new topic here. So Heisen's written a lot of pieces that are in minor keys. And in many of them, he uses a darker sound than is typical. A darker sound than a lot of minor key pieces do. Because usually, so this piece is in basically C minor. And we do see the B naturals, the leading tones. And then we get another leading tone. All through that passage there were no so the point is that if you don't use the B natural much, then it feels like we are not in a modern idea of a minor. Because in the minor key, oh crap, I can see my screen just went black. I'm going to fix that right away. It just happened right in front of my eyes. Right in front of my eyes. Bear with me. Come on. Get the sound back too. Ha. All right. Hopefully that did it. Okay, so glad I was watching. So the point that I'm making here about the use of that leading tone is every time you use that leading tone, that B natural, it creates the sensation of a 5-1, and we use this all the time in modern music. And by modern music, I mean 1600 on. Baroque music on. In the Renaissance, though, that leading tone didn't get used as much. And when I say as much, I mean at the cadences, at the final points of the phrases, yes, you would use those leading tones. But much more often, we would just be using the B flat, and we would have this kind of sound. So this is what we call the natural minor, but that wasn't the term that would have been used in the Renaissance. It was, if they called it anything, it was Aeolian. And then there was another sound that had an A natural called Dorian. And so there's a whole series of modes, different, and that's what these things are called, modes. They're just different kinds of scales. And I want to go into a lot of detail about modes next month. And I'm going to challenge people to make use of modes in your writing. And so I'm going to come back to Steiner's arrangement and do some things with it to show you. So basically, Heisen's pieces often, when they're in minor keys, have a more of a modal feel because he often doesn't use as much of the leading tone as some people would. And so they have more of this Aeolian mode feel, natural minor feel. And then, of course, Sora has been writing pieces that use modes in all sorts of other really interesting, creative ways that don't resemble how they used in the Renaissance at all. There's lots of ways of using modes, and I'm going to show you how jazz musicians use the different modes and other scales in the course of improvisation. So I want people to start thinking about this, and if you want to do some research on this, if you go to, I'll post a link in a bit, and I'll make it a free preview. But in my Counterpoint course, the lesson on modes, I'll make a free preview. And that'll show you what the modes are in the Renaissance way of looking at things. And then there's tons of references you can find. I'll also post a link to where I talk about different modes in my jazz improvisation primer, which kind of gives you more of a jazz musician spin on it. So this idea of how we use the modes is what I want to be exploring over the next month, because there's a lot of interesting things you can do with it. And so as an example, I am going to flip back to Steiner's piece here. And I'm going to play it through because it's just a lot of fun. And I'm going to play it through, and then I want to show you something that you can do thinking modally with it. So I'm just going to start playing it. Let me. Well, I forget how long it is, but I'm just going to play it. Too quiet. Is that quiet, or is it not playing at all? That's what I want to know. I think it's not playing at all. Hello? Let me go back to Heisen's piece. I lost my playback. See if I can get it back. Oh, I lost my playback. All right, we'll try killing MuseScore. And coming back to MuseScore. These things happen, right? We know this. If it doesn't work, I will pick up with Steiner's piece next time. Come on, keep loading. Give me this. So, will I have sound? No, I got nothing. I don't even have, I don't have playback at all. Yeah, it's just gonna be one of those days. All right. If that doesn't fix it. All right, well, in that case, we're done hearing MuseScore. So, sorry about that. Not knowing what's going on, I'm not going to spend forever trying to fix that because we've been going on a little while. I will just give you the quick rundown of modes. If we start on C, so first of all, I want to dissuade people of using the phrase mode of. This is the thing that jazz musicians do that ends up being confusing more than it's helpful. So I'm going to say what it is and what's going on. The way often we learn modes and the way my jazz improvisation primer describes it, because it's trying to talk the jazz musician language, is the major scale is king. And if we decide to start those same notes starting on D, we'll say that D is the second mode of the major scale. In other words, it's the notes of the major scale starting on scale degree 2. So I could also say have an A flat scale and then have the second mode of the A flat major scale. Same notes, but starting on B flat. That use of the word mode as if it's just a way of taking the original notes and starting somewhere else, this leads to enormous confusion. So anyone who's ever been confused about modes, I'm going to say that it's thinking of B flat Dorian as have anything to do with A flat major. Now, obviously it does have something to do with it. It's the same notes. But I want you to think of that as irrelevant. And I love giving this example because it was so crazy how I discovered this one day. The letters in my name, Marc Sabatella, I can rearrange to form the phrase alabaster clam. This is a true fact, a totally true fact. Marc Sabatella, alabaster clam, same letters rearranged. It also has no relevance whatsoever, right? There is no sense in which anything about me has to do with alabaster clams. They really don't have anything useful to do with each other. If I want to talk about me, I talk about me. If I want to talk about alabaster clams, I talk about alabaster clams. But I don't. The fact that you can rearrange the letters of one to form another is just a mild curiosity. So similarly, the fact that A flat major and B flat Dorian happen to have the same notes but rearranged, true but irrelevant. I want you to think of those as being irrelevant facts. Now, there's senses in which it does have some truth and some relevance too, but it's like I say, that type of thinking leads to a ton of confusion. So the way I'm going to present modes and talk about it, I'm going to start talking about it more next week, and I'm going to try to avoid using that type of language, even though it's out there and people use it, and I've used it in the past. I'm going to talk about a little more about that. So anyhow, if I'm not going to hear this, I guess I'm not going to hear my not going to hear my theme music either, right? Yeah, not hearing any audio at all. So I'm not going to. So we'll just go. I can play that much. I can't play all the counterpoint and all there. But anyhow, there's the music masterclass for you. And I hope you've enjoyed this session and talking as much as we have about SATB music and writing. But yeah, for the next few weeks, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about modes and different things about them, because it's just come up a number of times. There's been a lot of questions about it, and I want to try my best to answer some. So again, I'm going to post in the community some good resources. I'm going to post some resources for you to check out. Feel free to go Googling around for other resources, and then we'll regroup next week with working sound, hopefully, and talk a little bit more about modal music. And by all means, start playing around, have fun, and I'll catch you next time.